Welcome to this Flipgrid tutorial for EdTech Guides. After watching this tutorial, you should feel comfortable creating your own Flipgrid and getting ready to implement it in your classroom. So this is the first page you'll see when you go to flipgrid.com and decide your administrator. So I already have an account, but if you don't have an account, you will be able to create one. So you can see here that I already have one grid created. First, I want to put your attention to the top of the screen. You can see that there's a dashboard, a My Grid section, a connection section, and then my profile information. So your dashboard, as you might have guessed, contains all of your learning analytics. But first, we're going to focus on creating the grid. So in this version of Flipgrid, I have a free version, which means that I am allowed to have only one grid, but unlimited topics within that grid. So you can see if I click New Grid, it will show that to get more grids, I need to join Flipgrid Classroom. The Flipgrid Classroom update is about $69 a year, so it's really not too bad if you think that you will end up using this tool a lot. So I'm going to look at this first grid that I created so you can see a finished grid, and then we'll go through the process of creating one. So I clicked here, and this grid is about the neutrality of technology. So the image you see here is one of the stock images that Flipgrid has for use in their grids. You can see here that this grid is visible, and that there's options for editing the grid, sharing the grid, integrating the grid, duplicating it, or deleting it. You can see here that you have a unique code for the grid and the ability to view the grid as a student would view the grid, which we'll do in just a little bit. So, within this grid, you can create unlimited topics. So let's say that you have a class that's talking about ethics and information. So you might be concerned with various topics, one of which might be, is technology neutral? So here's your grid for your class about information ethics, and you can add a new topic to your grid right here. So first I'm going to show you this existing topic. So when you click this topic, you can still see here, you can view it as a student, you can see the topic code. So here, you're allowed to put in about 250 characters talking about the prompt or the question that you want students to be answering within their videos. And here's a video, a YouTube, talking about the neutrality of technology. But if you don't have a pre-made video, you can just use Flipgrid to record your own prompt for the students. So you can see here, I've chosen the Flipgrid to be active, and it's able to be frozen. So freezing, as you can see, means that students can view but no longer record, which is helpful whenever you want students to still be able to refer back to the content, but you are done with that interactive component of that learning. So once again, just as you could do with the grid, you can edit, share, move, duplicate, and delete this particular topic. And down here, you can see that one response has been created for this particular topic in this grid. So to view this response that the student would have here, you would just click the title, and then you would be able to see the video. And if I was speaking in this video, you would be able to hear me. Now this here is one of the really awesome features about Flipgrid, is that you are able to very quickly evaluate for the student their work. So you can give them a ranking from 1 to 5 on both their performance and their ideas. If you have Flipgrid Classroom, you would also be able to leave some personalized feedback. So this is really wonderful for the student to be able to get that kind of immediate feedback based on their work and what they're thinking in the class. So you can see here this export feature. You can export in Flipgrid many different options, but once again, those are limited to when you have the classroom version of Flipgrid. So this is pretty self-explanatory, the dashboard here. You can sort if you had more than one response here. You can sort by name, by date, likes, views, replies, performance, ideas, active, share, and actions. So we'll just go down here and see Actions is a very similar menu, and you'll see in Flipgrid it's very user-friendly. So similar menu to both the guide and the topic options. So before we go back into the overall grid and then move over to the dashboard, I want to show you what this looks like as a student. So I'm just going to click the View Topic as a Student option. And this is another very nice feature of Flipgrid. It says, shh, this grid is locked. So when creating this grid, this was for a closed class that I didn't need other people kind of discovering the grid or stumbling upon it. So students are given a password to access the grid. So this is what a student sees when they are working on the grid. So for a student to create a new grid, or to create a new response to the grid, it's very easy. Just click Add a Response, and then there's this, pops up. Flipgrid wants to use your camera and your microphone. At this current time, I'm just going to say block because I want the screencast to be able to use my mic, but students would be able to do that. So then once a student would go in there and create their response, they would just go through 4 simple steps. They'd post their initial response, they'd see how much time they have to post a response, they'd review it, make any edits they want to make, try again. They would be able to enter their email address and also take a screenshot to show up for what their selfie would look like when they're in this view that other students would also be viewing. So now I'm just going to hop back over to our admin page so we can dig a little bit deeper. So if I go back to my grids and the neutrality of technology grid, I'm going to go into editing this grid so you can see what that looks like. So this is when you're creating your first grid. So you can see there it says grids are a classroom or a community of learners. So if you're a high school teacher and you're teaching bio and anatomy and phys, right, you might want 2 different grids for those 2 different sets of students. So this is the basic grid details, and then this is the security, and this is where you're able to choose to have a password. You can choose to moderate responses. This could be particularly helpful if you were talking about something that's rather contentious. For the student, you want to make sure responses are respectful and respect the diversity of inclusion. And then you can see what your features are, right? So auto-generated transcriptions, which is wonderful for accessibility features, auto-generated keywords from what the students are saying, and a Notify Me feature. And here's where you're able to select your image. And you can select your own file, but Flipgrid has a very nice selection of stock photos. So I'm just going to update my grid. And that is the general consensus for creating a grid. So we're just going to hop over to the dashboard so you can get a sense of what that looks like. So you can see here, it gives you a very broad overview at the top of the dashboard. I have 1 grid through the free version, 1 topic within that grid, 1 student has responded. You can see that response happened this week, and 3 total interactions, 1 minute of engagement time. So that gives you a broad overview of your grid. Here you're able to, if you have more than 1 grid, to view it in detail, but you can see both responses and interactions. And then down here you can see if there are any unwatched videos that have not been viewed yet, and you are able to export those as well if you have the Flipgrid Classroom version. So just like the student side is very user-friendly for the student, the analytics side is very user-friendly for the teacher. It gives you a really quick snapshot of what's going on in the Flipgrid and how it's working out for your students. So the final feature of Flipgrid is the connections. So this allows you to make connections around the world with other teachers who are using Flipgrid, which is absolutely wonderful to be able to build and kind of connect with people who are doing similar initiatives. So you can choose to add a connection, you can join a connection, whatever you think is going to be relevant to your work. So in this instance, I'm just going to say that I'm interested in the tech time grid. And then you can actually visit this person's grid who's interested in education technology. Oh, and they no longer have their grid active. But we'll click on the Freedom Writers and see what that looks like. So this grid is still active. So it says in 3 minutes or less, can you hook us on your summer reading? Which I love that prompt, right? And so then you can kind of see what's going on within her Flipgrid, and you are able to follow the Flipgrid just as you would be able to follow something on Twitter. So that is the crux and the very important features that you need to know about Flipgrid. This tool has been invaluable for me, and I know that if you get in there and start interacting with it and being able to create your own grid and your own topic and get to see your students' response to being able to participate in class in this sort of way, that you will also fall in love with Flipgrid and see utility for it in a variety of learning environments.